Hello, I'm Scott Stiles, and in this video I plan to answer the question, does EU MDR require notified bodies to conduct on-site audits of medical device manufacturer suppliers? And if so, how can I manage the risks? If your organization is planning to market medical devices within the EU, you may be wondering if EU MDR requires notified bodies to conduct on-site audits. The quick answer is, the MDR does not require on-site supplier audits by default. However, it does require notified bodies to consider the need for on-site supplier audits using a risk-based approach. So, the likelihood a notified body will require an on-site supplier audit depends on a couple of things. First, on the risks associated with the activities of the supplier. And secondly, on the level of control over the supplier your organization demonstrates. And this risk approach applies to both announced and unannounced on-site supplier audit. Obviously, the potential for notified body supplier audits is a significant concern. You'll have to spend time preparing suppliers for the audits, then provide support when the audits actually happen, and your organization will need to pick up the expenses of your notified body, and often your supplier's costs, depending on how your quality agreement is structured. And another point to keep in mind is any nonconformances observed will be issued as findings against your organization. This is because, as the legal manufacturer, it is your certification that is being assessed. What can you do to mitigate the risks? To get prepared, I suggest using a three-step process, which includes identifying high-risk suppliers, demonstrating control of these suppliers, and, if needed, prepare high-risk suppliers for audits. Now let's get started with step one, which is supplier risk categorization. You should first establish a supplier control SOP that defines a clear process for assessing and documenting the risk of your suppliers. The key is to define a clear line between supplier categories where the conformity of the finished device is significantly influenced by the supplier's activity from those where it is not. 3. To document this approach, you should maintain an approved supplier list, which includes the risk category of each supplier. At the end of this first step, you should end up with a short list of high-risk suppliers. And for these suppliers, you should plan out how you will demonstrate sufficient control to make the case to your notified body that an on-site supplier audit is not required. So, step 2 is to demonstrate control of high-risk suppliers. To do this, here are my top 10 tips. Number 1, the first thing is to always maintain great relationships with your key high-risk suppliers. You need to treat them as an extension of your company and communicate with them on a regular basis. Number 2, establish clearly defined quality agreements that include responsibility for any applicable regulatory requirements. Number 3, conduct robust on-site supplier audits using qualified auditors with applicable experience based on the device or technology. Number 4, keep good records of the audits and track the closure of any required actions taken, including evidence of effectiveness for nonconformances observed. Number 5, ensure evidence of supplier monitoring is on file, and if applicable, sterilization process monitoring and revalidation. Number 6, document a medical device file for each device type or family, which includes reference to supplier specifications and SOPs. Number 7, consider keeping copies of the supplier's key SOPs. Number 8, keep copies of example device history records available. Number 9, maintain up-to-date flowcharts of manufacturing processes. And number 10, consider maintaining videos of the manufacturing process to show auditors during the audits. The idea here is to give auditors a warm and fuzzy feeling that you are in full control of your suppliers. Having all this information at the ready decreases the chance that an auditor will decide there is a lack of control and that an on-site audit of the supplier is required. If sufficient control of suppliers cannot be demonstrated, then you need to make sure your suppliers are well prepared for both announced and unannounced on-site audits. This is where step 3 comes in, which is to prepare your suppliers for notified body audits. First, start by making sure the supplier has an SOP established with procedures for managing external audits. and the resources at the ready to support both announced and unannounced audits. If the supplier does not have such a procedure, help them establish one. Number 2, include requirements within the quality agreement regarding the supplier's responsibility to maintain procedures for managing notified body audits, resource and support both announced and unannounced notified body audits, and provide notification within a designated time frame in the case of unannounced audits. So in summary, if your notified body determines a supplier is required to be audited on site due to high risk of their activities, especially when sufficient control of the supplier cannot be demonstrated, then you should expect and prepare for both announced and unannounced supplier audits. Announced supplier audits could be as frequently as once every 12 months, depending on the risk classification of the device and the risk of the supplier's activities, while unannounced supplier audits would occur at least once every 5 years, but could be more frequently depending on the risk. To mitigate the risks associated with notified body audits of your suppliers, you should establish a risk-based supplier control process and identify high-risk suppliers. Make every effort to demonstrate sufficient control of high-risk suppliers, and prepare suppliers for on-site audits where sufficient control cannot be demonstrated. Thanks for watching. I hope you find this information helpful as you work to ensure compliance to EU MDR requirements. If you need further advice or help with writing or reviewing your procedures, please contact me. You can contact me through my website, linked in the description. I wish you all the best during your next audit inspection. Goodbye.